أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. Brothers and sisters, friends and guests, we want to welcome you to this week's edition of a conversation with El-Hajj Maurice Salah Khan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today, we have another one of those very special broadcasts. The hot topic for our listeners and viewers in South Africa this afternoon, in the US, for the US this afternoon, and for South Africa this evening, is a conversation on global challenges with two very special guests, Dr. Tarek Ramadan and Moazzam Begg. Now, I'm going to, in the interest of time, forego reading the extensive resume of Dr. Ramadan. He's a world-renowned European Muslim scholar of Egyptian heritage who has been a guest of ours on a number of occasions in the past. He's no stranger to this broadcast. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to just share the resume of our second guest, who is a first for this program. Just a little of his background. His name is Moazzam Begg. Now, within human rights circles, this is a well-known name. But for those of you who are not closely attuned to human rights issues, he will no doubt be a stranger that should be introduced. And so let me just share this little bit of background. He is a British-born Muslim and a former Guantanamo Bay detainee. Yes, you heard that right. After his release, he became one of the most prominent public speakers and Muslim advocates for justice and dialogue. He is the author of the bestseller Enemy Combatant, a book that I got shortly after it came out. It's a very thought-provoking and informative read. I highly recommend it, in which he recounts his experience as an innocent man detained and tortured at Guantanamo, Bagram, and Kandahar. The Muslim 500 listed him as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. The New Statesman's listed him in the top 50 heroes of our time. He now serves as the outreach director for CAGE and has traveled extensively to investigate state abuses and Western complicity in torture, including visits to Tunisia, Libya, and Syria. A direct eyewitness to the conflicts in Bosnia, Afghanistan, and Syria. His life has been recorded by the Columbia University Oral History Project and the BBC Storyville documentary, The Confession. Now, before I bring these brothers on, I want to show a short video. I want us to show a short video clip that will set the tone for the first half of today's broadcast. Whenever you're ready, Brother Sadiq.
Effort was a military effort. And unfortunately, a military effort is not a developmental effort. A military effort doesn't win the support of people. It ended up having no broad support in the population. And the result is the Taliban were able to wait and then return after $1 trillion. So, of course, I look at this from an American point of view, and I say how stupid that policy was, not just for 20 years, but for 40 years.
But Professor Sachs, you're so politically incorrect, I have to say, in the eyes of many, probably in your country right now. How could you dare to say all these things?
Well, because, you know, at my age, and I've been at this for 41 years working all over the world, I've seen straight up Vietnam, the disaster in Cambodia. I've seen the U.S. intervention in Central America. We've seen 2 Gulf wars. We've seen what covert operations did to destroy Syria. It's enough. I'm so sad for my country.
But one after another. Why, Professor?
There's an old expression in English that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, the United States has a powerful military, so everything looks like a solution for a war. And so the United States uses the military as foreign policy. But there is no foreign policy that comes out of a military. And we use the military in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria. We use the military in this region in Central Asia. We use the military in Central America. We use the military in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Not once did this work.
If all these things happen once and again, there must be a logic. What is driving all these perceptions? There must be some real interest down there.
Okay, as a little food for thought on the table as we begin this conversation, without any further ado, I'd like to bring our brothers on, Dr. Tarek Ramadan and Moazzam Begg.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to my two dear brothers.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah, wa alaikum assalam wa
أخي
rahmatullahi.
معظم بيغ أخي الحج لكن بارك الله فيكما. Thank you so much.
You know something, brothers, I can't tell you how much of a joy it is to have both of you on at the same time for such a thought-provoking topic as the one we're about to deal with. It's really a pleasure, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless a lot of barakah to come out of this for everyone who sees it, and now live as well as later, inshallah ta'ala. Let's begin with your reaction, not just to the video, a short piece of video that was just shown, but what has been going on overall over the past week or so in Afghanistan. What are your thoughts? Let's begin with you, Brother Tarek, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to leave our brother Moazzam Bey. He's knowledgeable about the situation over there, and I think that his first reaction could be enlightening for all of us. So if you have something, let us start with the priorities to listen to the more knowledgeable. Barakallahu fiik.
Okay. And no doubt, Brother Moazzam, you know, you have a very deep insight, brother, on and no doubt strong feelings about what has taken place, given the fact that you have experienced Afghanistan up close and personal. What are your thoughts, Akib?
Barakallah fiqh, Sheikh Tarek. I would have rather listened to what he has to say. I still have I think that his tahlilat, his analysis will be very important for us. Nonetheless, I will speak as somebody as a witness to having lived under the Taliban during that first period of time, or a period of time when they came into power, and having been, of course, imprisoned with Taliban people, with some of the leaders, having witnessed the torture of the United States of America inside Bagram prison, inside Kandahar, and of course in Guantanamo. The first thing that comes to mind, of course, this is bizarre. This is like as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has himself intervened in this issue. 20 years of the war on terrorism, 20 years that began with cruise missile strikes, that began with mass bombs that I saw, the results of daisy cutters that weigh 15,000 pounds, smart bombs, vacuum bombs, phosphorus bombs, That was before the invasion. But there was one thing that happened before the invasion they dropped that were not ordnance, they were not explosive, and that was leaflets. So we saw planes flying over southern Afghanistan, these American warplanes. They were dropping leaflets, and these leaflets, as Donald Rumsfeld famously said, are falling like snowflakes in December in Chicago. And these leaflets, each leaflet offered a bounty of $5,000 for every Taliban and Al-Qaeda suspect that an ordinary person would hand over to the Americans. So as a result of that, you can imagine, in the same way that money has been pumped into into Afghanistan by the United States and others, and it's based now on an aid economy. In the same way, the majority of people were sold over for a bounty to the Americans and ended up in Guantanamo. The irony upon ironies is this, is that amongst those people who built and began the peace deal in Doha are 5 members, senior ranking members, including battlefield commanders of the Taliban, who like Khairullah Khairkhwa, like Mullah Wathiq, like Mullah Mazloum. Some of these are top Taliban individuals. As a result of the prisoner exchange that the Americans did for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, he's an American soldier captured by the Taliban in Afghanistan, the deal was that the 5 Taliban guys get released and sent to Doha, and Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is handed over to the CIA in Afghanistan, and that's exactly what happened. So these same 5 individuals who were tortured, stripped naked, physically, sexually, and religiously abused became the men who began the first peace talks, major peace talks. We're setting up the political office of the Islamic Emirate in Doha. And if that wasn't strange enough, Mullah Baradar, who's now the head of the Taliban, or doing the discussions, was held by the Pakistanis for almost 10 years. They all met just before Donald Trump left office with Mike Pompeo in Doha. And Donald Trump spoke on the phone to Mullah Baradar, and he said, I know that you are a tough people. I know that you're people who are fighting for your own land. I can understand that, to paraphrase. So in the end of all of that, after the tens of thousands of deaths in Afghanistan, after the trillions of dollars spent on an army that couldn't defend itself and couldn't build itself, in the end, after the withdrawal of the US troops, which will take place completely on the 31st of August, the Taliban leaders are now sitting with people like Hamid Karzai, with Abdullah, with Gulabuddin Hikmatyar, all of those people who were at different at variance with the Taliban, and now they are seeking to have a united government. So you have to ask this question: why did all those innocent people have to die? What was it for? The American soldiers will be asking, the British soldiers' families are asking, why? What was it for? The answer is, it was for nothing other than for profiteering, other than for trying to, for imperial hubris, to say that we are such a strong power. But it is really, in our lifetime, it's shocking and strange and amazing. 2 superpowers. Before I just want to finish on one final thing, because I want to hear Sheikh Tarek. I was imprisoned in Bagram in 2002 with a young man. His name was Sharif. Sharif told me that his father was buried alive in Bagram by the Soviet Union, by occupying forces of the Soviet Union. And his father was fighting against him, was an activist and also fought against the Soviet Union occupation. Buried alive right outside the place where the Americans were holding him and me together. And the writing was still on the wall in Russian. You could still see they had built this part of the Bagram air base that the Americans had taken over. I remember the day when he said to the Americans, he said, my father is buried alive outside here. Do you think, and by the USSR, do you think that his son will submit to the USA? And that for me kind of puts an underlining mark about what's been going on in Afghanistan for all of these years.
What are your thoughts, Dr.
MashaAllah. I think as you introduced Moazzam Begg, the way and his experience and the way he's looking at things should once again make him one of the most important voices to be heard today among the Muslim communities, and not only in the West, but in the West. Why? For I think what we heard right now, it's important because the way he from the very beginning, it's not the first time he's taking this position. And here, what he is saying about what is going on in Afghanistan is also to send a message to all our brothers and sisters in Islam about be careful with the way you are going to talk about the Taliban, the way you are going to talk about the people who are fighting for their lands in Afghanistan, because this demonization that we are facing in the Western media is something which is very, very worrying and disturbing when we see some of our Muslim leaders very quick to demonize the Taliban and the leaders. And as much as I think we can be at variance as to the political vision, we should first be quite clear about the fact that when it comes to their sincerity, their commitment to Islam, we have to be very cautious with our judgment and not to fall too quickly into what is said in the West about them. Now, what I want to say about this is I myself, as to the ideology, as to the political understanding, I have been critical for years when it came to dealing with the Taliban, but also before that with what was said and what was promoted by bin Laden and others. This, I think, from within the Islamic understanding, we have to be quite clear. Now, what we are seeing, and this is why I think it's important, and this is why also I wanted to listen to Moazzam Begg first, is to acknowledge the fact here that some of the people who are now in charge and some of the people now who are trying to talk about peace within the country are people who are leaders of different trends and different even understanding and reading and interpretation of Islam, because this was the case, and even before Rabbani and Mas'ud and Hekmakhtiar, before even we had what is going on now with the Taliban in Afghanistan. This is something that happened before, and the divisions came, and these divisions were instrumentalized, of course, by the Russian, but also by the American, and then also promoted by the Americans. My take now is a bit more to be very cautious about what is going on. To tell you the truth, I don't buy the fact that the West is now leaving Afghanistan and they are ready for the peace process to be achieved and for the country to be independent. There is too much an economic and a geostrategic interest in the region just after 20 years to say, okay, why then all this? I think that this could be a very, very, very nasty political game in the region, a very nasty calculation to let them in and to again start a new strategy, because the region is critical and so crucial for geostrategic reason, but not only for this. It could be a way to use what is happening in Afghanistan with a media campaign, a local, you know, what is called by the US State Department low intensity conflict, which has been the case for 20 years now, is to change the strategy, but to keep it around, just to promote something which is going to be again what we heard. Why is it for the British Prime Minister, the French President, the American President, just to talk to their people as if something very big was happening when they are so silent when Gaza is completely destroyed? It's because it's central. Afghanistan and what is happening in Afghanistan will have a global impact on everything which is going to happen, and even this way of covering and presenting and shaping the symbol of terrorism around the world. And I would say we have to be very cautious with this step that was taken by the States and taken by the French and the British in Afghanistan, because I don't think it's the end of the story. I think they are going to be involved in many, many things. And to tell you the truth, I don't trust the Emirates. I don't trust Qatar. I don't trust all this country as being involved in promoting peace. I think we have to know for whom and how they are playing the game.
Absolutely, I agree, and I'm glad that you made the point, my brother, on the point of caution against us as Muslims joining in on the demonization of the Taliban. SubhanAllah, this has been something that has been very disturbing for me. I'm not surprised at, while a bit dismayed, I'm not surprised about the reaction from Afghanistan itself, especially from the more urban and developed areas of Afghanistan. I also recognize the fact that what we have been seeing on our news screens and hearing on our radio broadcasts and the various other communication means has not been representative, I don't believe, of the majority of the Afghan people. I believe this is a small segment of the Afghan population that has been focused upon by international media. And I remember seeing one, I only saw it one time, one clip, and this was from an independent news source, of Afghans taking selfies with the soldiers of the Taliban. They were taking selfies with them, and they were celebrating the fact that they had taken over the country. I think the combination, for me, the combination of the way that they were able to move as effectively as they have moved over the past few weeks and months, and taking over one territory after the other with very little opposition, is a reflection of, to me, them being more representative of the people, the broad swath of people of Afghanistan, than the folks who were more well situated in the more developed centers of Afghanistan. But you all probably know a lot better than I do. Brother Moazzam,
Brother El-Hajj, I was going to say something in response to what you just said, or just to add.
Okay, please, yes.
One of the things that people don't really know, and it was documented in a report done by a Scandinavian NGO, which I forget what the name of the NGO was, but it was interesting because I read in there that they concluded that one of the reasons that the Taliban was successful is because of the one thing that you would think would make them the least successful, and that is Sharia. And what I mean by this is, to most people, when you hear the word Sharia, you think, oh my God, hudud punishments, chopping hands, stoning the adulterers, that same old tired story that we keep hearing. But to most people, as we know, as Muslims, the Sharia is your normal day-to-day proceedings of life and fiqh and understanding, and trying to develop yourself and live according to the Islamic rules. So one of the things that the Taliban was doing very, very efficiently in their courts was dispensing justice. And I mean, when I say justice, I mean settling disputes in a very simple, unadulterated, unbureaucratic way, without any bribery, without any corruption. And this was very effective, so effective, in fact, the report states that multiple members of the government, the Afghan government, would go to the Taliban courts to seek adjudication on disputes they had. And as a result of that, people trusted the Taliban. The Taliban actually used, Sheikh Tarek will know this, it's called Al-Majalla Al-Uthmaniyya, which is the book of jurisprudence from the time of the Ottomans. They were using this as part of Hanafi fiqh law as a base to adjudicate for all the judges. So all the judges have this. Now, I was fascinated to read this in this report, to say that this is why and how the Taliban are winning hearts and minds. It's not so much with, say, some of the other Islamic groups, say in Egypt, where it would be they were building schools and they were part of the education system, building hospitals. It was this part of settling disputes. And remember, for Muslims, the idea of the Prophet ﷺ himself, that he was recognized so strongly because of his ability to settle disputes. And I think that nobody has even touched on this at all. And they don't want you to know this part of it, because the majority of people in Afghanistan, unlike the majority of people in Britain or America, live in rural areas, not in the cities, as you've explained. So that's the majority, and you're not hearing the voice of the majority. And if you would, they would say that we trusted them because they were not corrupt like the government. They were not bureaucratic. We didn't have to pay bribes to get a decision done in the courts. And this is something on the one side. On the other side, as having lived under the Taliban before, they had some very harsh laws, very harsh interpretation of laws and applications of it. They have had to grow and move on. And you'll see the faces of the new Taliban speaking English as good as I do. You'll see the new faces of the Taliban using social media, using in the digital age. And they're not those kind of backward people that you thought in the past of. All of us, yourself, myself, Sheikh Tarek, the entire world, none of us are how we were 20 years ago. I know I had no white hair 20 years ago. I had complete black hair. So we are allowed to grow as mankind, as human beings. Why are they not allowed to grow?
To contradict you, okay.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah, that's so true, brother. That is so true. And coupled with that is, you know, this reality. The median age of the Afghan population is 18.4 years. That is the median age. It's a very young population, like it is in many other, you know, developing nations. It's a very young population. The majority of the population was either not even alive or very, very young when the Taliban were in power briefly before. And so what we're seeing in terms of this this outpouring, that very selective and very narrowly presented outpouring of Taliban opposition, we're seeing the power of propaganda, how propaganda can be selectively used and how it can be presented in a way that makes it appear to be very different than what it actually is. It's really fascinating when you think about it. But also disturbing. Brother Tarek, do you want to weigh in here, brother?
Yeah, I'm listening to Moazzam. I would be more cautious on 2 points, and I think that this is important. I think you are completely right when you are saying, you know, the way they were, it's not the way they are, and they are evolving. And inshallah, I don't know them enough to tell you that this is going to happen. I'm quite sure that with what I heard over the last 10 days, it's quite clear that there are things that are moving. It's not the same discourse that we had 20 years ago. Now, I would say 3 things for us from where we are when it comes to analyzing what is going on the ground, because, you know, once again, 10 years ago, I had the same discussions with many of my brothers and sisters in Islam about what was going on in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Libya. I was very criticized because I was saying, you know what, I'm cautiously optimistic. Be careful with what is happening. For 3 reasons, and I would say that our position today, I would start with what you just said, both of you. I think it's very important for us to remind the people around us that stop talking about only the leaders and stop talking only about the leadership. We should know that over the last 20 years, the people who were the victims first of the Russian politics and then the Western politics were the Afghani people. The people who paid the price of what happened in the United States of America in 2001 were people who were completely innocent, and up to now they are dealing with road they are dealing with. There is an environmental issue in Afghanistan now with water and all this, and we have to say this, and we have to remind the people, be careful. Stop talking only about politics and leadership, talk about people, and there is a need to support the Afghani people, and not only to help them to go out from the country, but to stay and to build the future of this country, not to tell us, you know what, we have to support journalists, we have to support intellectuals, we have to support women, we have to support the people who are supporting us. This is what we are hearing in the West. This is not acceptable. We have to support the Afghani people there and to help them to build their country. And the best way to do this is to talk about independence, to talk about the fact that we have to lead this country, but also to support them economically, not only to support them by bringing the leader to talk, but also the people to build. This is the first position, I would say, as Muslim and as Muslims around the world. The second thing is to support all the talks that are going on among the different trends in Afghanistan, just to try to get something which is, we need to come to an agreement. So yes, the people could be supportive, and some are critical. Some are critical towards the Taliban, and they should be part of an internal discussion in Afghanistan to find their way. And this is what should happen today, and we have to support this. And there is one last thing that I would say. As I told you, it's so important, it's so much an important area there, that this decision to leave, or apparently to leave the country, the way it was said to us and the way it was presented to us, I have a question mark about the political intention behind what is presented as a withdrawal from the region, because it's still very important. And I would say for three reasons: for the geostrategic reasons that we were talking about, for lithium and oil, and the link between Russia and China. It's essential. And we have to take into account two players here. Pakistan is a very important player, and the relationship with China is going to be very critical in the coming years. And now, and I would say we have to be cautious about the fact that sometimes what is presented with as a positive step is done with the intention of the next step. And the next step is maybe to take advantage. And I would say, I don't know what Moazzam would say, but my take was, with many of, I would say it's not the same at all, but with the people who are sometimes very traditionalist and very strict, is sometimes they are very sincere religiously and sometimes quite naive politically. And I would say we have to be careful with this, because I have seen people who are behind them, they are not sincere religiously, but smart politically. And we have to be careful with the people behind. Wallahu a'lam.
Brother Moazzam, well, I want to give you the final word on this topic before we shift in the remaining time we have to another very important topic. You want a closing thought on Afghanistan, Aki?
I never imagined. I mean, you see, my life changed not on September the 11th, but as when the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan began. One of the reasons, the reasons I was in Afghanistan, I was there with my family, with my wife, with my children. We'd been involved in building a school for girls. And this was crucial because at the time, it was reported that the Taliban did not allow female education. In fact, they were struggling on education regardless, and their understanding of the role of women was a little bit questionable, let's just say. But we wanted to help them. We didn't want to join the kind of attack against them. Let's go there, let's help, let's bring out what we've learned from the West that will benefit them, that they will accept it, that they won't accept from Western non-Muslims, and let us set up schools. And alhamdulillah, they were very receptive to it. So that's one point. One point. If they were receptive back then I think they'd be even more receptive now with how the world is going. Echoing what Sheikh Tarek says, that we need to practically get involved in assisting the Afghan people. And by the way, people are a lot more advanced now in everything than they were back then. In terms of the sincerity, I don't know how to judge a person's sincerity or not. All I can do is see what they've played out. And I would say this, that it is now time for all of the world, the Muslim world. One is because whatever way you want to put it, the withdrawal of the US troops from Afghanistan, which is still taking place, from the imagery is worse than Saigon. It's worse than Vietnam. You didn't have images of people falling off planes and tens of thousands of people. So whatever that is, I don't think they contemplated this. They didn't know it was going to happen like this. And what we need to do as Muslims around the world, because we've been desperate to see a success story, is to at least allow us to put this in our mind, that steadfastness of fighting against the occupation has brought us to this day, whether you agree with them, whether you disagree with them. Had they capitulated like everybody else, we would not be talking about this. We would be talking about complete and utter US dominance in the region. Mm-hmm. So that's what we should be able to, just in the way that leaders of Hamas and so forth have sent messages of congratulations to the Taliban for that thing alone, let alone the politics and the geopolitics, is to say we congratulate the Afghan people on being able to, and being steadfast in pushing back the invader. So for me, that's it. For this point, it let me, after 20 years, after 22 decades of this, at least have a little bit of comfort in the knowledge that not every occupation ended in capitulation.
Alhamdulillah. A good note to end on in this segment. Now we're going to shift to another very important area of concern for your brother Salah Khan, and I'm sure for the two of you as well. Our sister in Islam, Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, was recently attacked in the prison medical center. It's more of a prison than a medical center that she has been imprisoned in Fort Worth, Texas, FMC Carswell. She was attacked, and this is not the first time she was attacked, but in this case, it was quite more serious than the first attack that came to our attention, and she had to be removed from the area in a wheelchair, and we're very concerned at this point about her safety, even more concerned about her safety. It's been 18 years now. So we want to begin this segment with two short video clips that I'd like for you and the audience to see, and then we will begin our discussion, inshallah.
Aafia Siddiqui pleaded for calm in the Muslim world, telling her supporters not to protest violently after she was handed down what amounts to a life sentence for the attempted murder of Americans in Afghanistan. Siddiqui spoke for 30 minutes, often rambling about her dreams in prison, genetic testing, and her belief that Israel and her prison warden were plotting to attack the United States. The defense had recommended a 12-year sentence, telling the judge their client was mentally ill, a claim Siddiqui denies.
What we had today was a vivid insight into the state of mind of Aafia Siddiqui. And I think without question, people were shaking their heads.
Afghan police detained Siddiqui along with her son in 2008 after finding her with cyanide and notes on New York landmarks. U.S. authorities, who first accused her of supporting al-Qaeda in 2003, came to question her. During her trial, 6 witnesses testified that she grabbed a weapon belonging to a U.S. soldier and opened fire. But since her conviction, military documents about her arrest have been leaked, and they make no mention of her firing the gun. Siddiqui's supporters in the U.S. as well as her native Pakistan believe Siddiqui had been held in a secret prison prior to her arrest and tortured.
86 years for a woman who's never harmed anyone in her life, and no time and no identification of the people who kidnapped her, who tortured her, and who caused the same for her 2 children and family. Where is the justice in that?
Responding to public pressure, the Pakistani government spent a reported $2 million on her defense and has called for her repatriation. After the sentencing, the Pakistani embassy told Al Jazeera, "We will continue our legal and diplomatic efforts for her transfer to Pakistan." Outside the federal courthouse where protesters gathered, prosecutors refused to comment. But the judge said there was no credible evidence of a secret detention by the U.S. prior to her arrest.
What we don't know is what other documents are out there because the classified evidence has been denied to the defense. We believe that there are more documents out there.
Siddiqui's lawyers say they have plenty of grounds for an appeal, from that leaked military document to her mental state during the trial. In the meantime, the judge recommended that she be held in a federal prison in Texas where she can receive psychological treatment. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
The case of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui remains a mystery. The US-educated PhD graduate went missing along with her 3 children 5 years ago while on her way to catch a domestic flight in her native Pakistan. Her whereabouts since then remains unknown, although her family and human rights activists believe she was held in the custody of either the US or Pakistani intelligence services as part of the war on terror.
We want to know what happened to Aafia Siddiqui from 31st of March 2003 until 17th of July 2008.
The US has always denied that it held any female prisoners in its main Afghan holding facility in Bagram Air Base. However, suspicion was aroused when the former Guantanamo Bay detainee Moazzam Begg, who also spent a long spell in Bagram, said he heard the sound of a woman being abused on several occasions.
When I was in Bagram during the year of 2002, I used to hear the sounds of a woman screaming in the interrogation rooms where I was at, or adjacent to it, and I was led to believe that it was my own wife being tortured next door. The screams were intermittent, they were very sharp, they were high-pitched, they were evidently of a woman. She was frightened, she was terrified in fact.
A major turning point of the case came after the Pakistani political opposition leader Imran Khan and a group of human rights activists from the UK held a press conference outlining Dr. Siddiqui's story and their suspicions. 1 month later, the US claimed to have arrested Aafia Siddiqui in Afghanistan after she had apparently attempted to attack US military personnel. But the US government hasn't given any explanation for her absence of several years, other than accusing her of having links with Al-Qaeda. She now faces trial in New York, charged with the attempted murder of US personnel.
Well, at the moment, sadly, she's very ill. She's very ill to communicate with anybody, really. And she's had difficulty communicating with her lawyers due to the harsh, humiliating restrictions imposed by the jail authorities. And also, she's just not well enough. And she really, at this moment, she needs to be treated. Once she's recovered, then she can deal with the legal process.
Further confusing matters, following inquiries, the US government has now backtracked on its previous statement that it had never held any female detainees at Bagram Air Base. It's now admitted to holding 1 female prisoner, but maintains it never held Dr. Aafia Siddiqui. Nonetheless, the U-turn has raised more questions and doubts over the US government's account of Dr. Siddiqui's arrest, and has given some credence to her claims of being held in Bagram for several years. Furthermore, her case has come to symbolize the plight of hundreds of Pakistani citizens who've gone missing over the years and are alleged to have been kidnapped by Pakistani and US intelligence agencies.
It is not only the case of Aafia Siddiqui, it is the case of more than 500 missing persons. If the State Department could make a false denial about Aafia Siddiqui, and if the President of Pakistan, Pervez Musharraf, in his book In the Line of Fire, admits that he has been selling the bodies of the Pakistani citizens to the FBI and US State Department, and despite that, we don't know the whereabouts of our Pakistanis. Sir, it's a very serious issue.
The previous government of Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf had been accused of kidnapping and handing over hundreds of its citizens to US intelligence agencies in return for financial and military support in the years following the invasion of Afghanistan. It's an allegation that President Musharraf himself denied, but human rights groups believe Dr. Siddiqui's case represents just one of those hundreds of kidnappings.
Okay, my brothers, I want to share a Facebook post that I just came across earlier today, and I thought it was very appropriate to share it in this discussion. The poster said, and this clearly is a Pakistani, the scholar from Pakistan handed over to the Americans by the tyrant dictator Pervez Musharraf. All Afghanis are our brothers and freedom fighters. So it is not a crime to stand our ground against occupiers that is in the US who are the terrorists here. Now that Talibans have pardoned the US and given them protection, we want the daughter of our nation back in our homeland, quote unquote. Your thoughts on this ongoing saga of our sister in Islam, Dr. Aafia Siddiqui? Those, as you could tell by the nature of the discourse, those were videos that were made years ago. But now we're in the 18th year of Aafia's wrongful imprisonment, and as a political prisoner and prisoner of war. And her condition is, to put it in one word, it's terrible. What are your thoughts?
I remember first going to Aafia's family's house in 2010. I met with her mother. I met with her sister Fawzia. I met with Ahmed, the young boy, and with Maryam, all of whom had been in custody with Aafia. Who wasn't present was Suleiman, the young boy, who at the time of his disappearance, of Aafia's disappearance, was only 6 months old. We've never known what became of him, and it's rumored that he died. Now, there are several, I'd say, smokes and mirrors around this case. But what is evident, as somebody who himself has been a prisoner of the United States military in Afghanistan, I can tell you this much. Under US military protocol, no soldier will ever leave his weapon unattended. No soldier will leave his weapon loaded and cocked with a round in the chamber, knowing that there is a dangerous prisoner to be had close by, which is what they accuse Aafia of being. Now, not for want of trying, I know there was many people who would have, in Guantanamo, Bagram, elsewhere, who had been fighting the Americans. There's no doubt about that. And had they had the opportunity, they would have picked up a weapon and fired it against the Americans. No doubt in my mind. But the Americans would never allow that to happen because of the protocol they follow as professional soldiers. That's one part of it. So I find it extremely hard to believe that Aafia, this 5-foot-something woman who weighs about 100 pounds, could manage to somehow overpower these guards, take the weapon, and then fire it, miss, and then get shot. So Yvonne Ridley has gone to Afghanistan. She's gone to Bagram. She's gone to the home of the governor of Ghazni. She's gone to the police station where it happened. And everybody who spoke in that case from the Afghans, remember, they were on the side of the Americans after all. They said that the events that took place that day are nothing like what have been described by the Americans. Yet none of their testimony has been allowed into the court at all. In addition to this, the fact that Aafia Siddiqui disappeared and says, and even identifies some people at the time where she said she was held in US custody in Bagram and was tortured, abused, physically and sexually violated, none of it was permitted into the court proceedings. There are people I know or know of who have been accused of killing American soldiers, let alone attempting to, who are not serving the kind of sentence Aafia gets. And there's one more thing, of course, that's really important. How does the United States of America have jurisdiction, legal jurisdiction, over a woman, a Pakistani woman in Afghanistan? Because if they have jurisdiction of all cases in Afghanistan, that means anybody that commits a crime in Afghanistan against anybody should be brought to the United States of America. So these fundamental questions make me think that there's something far more sinister taking place. And one more thing that I'm almost completely and shockingly and ashamedly, I have to say, as a dual British and Pakistani citizen, the Pakistanis handed me over to the Americans without any legal process. They took me from my house at gunpoint with a gun to my head in the middle of the night in front of my family, dragged me away, forced me to be interrogated by American CIA. They said to me in the words, in Urdu, those who know Urdu, bete, it means, it's a term of endearment, oh son, we know you've done nothing wrong, but this is America breathing down our necks. We must do this. So they handed me over, and Pervez Musharraf was in charge at the time, and without any due legal process at all. I call it a kidnap, an abduction, and a rendition. That is what it was. There was nothing legal about it in any form, shape, or whatsoever. And me at the time, being a citizen of Pakistan, if they could do that to me, they could do that to anybody of other citizenship. And indeed, Pervez Musharraf and I have the same publisher. We have, ironically, the same people published our books. In his book, In the Line of Fire, he says that I received bounties of millions of dollars for people I handed over. That included citizens of other nations, but it also included citizens of his own country. And Pakistan has, as a result of applying American foreign policy in its country, lost tens of 50 to 60,000 troops and people, and instituted a program of rendition, kidnap, disappearance, the likes of which Aafia Siddiqui's case is only one. There are hundreds of disappeared. There's a sister there called Amina Masood Janjua, whose husband has been disappeared for 15 years. She started an organization called Defense of Human Rights, and as a result has learnt about thousands of cases of Baluchis, of those in the war on terror and so forth. And it is shocking that we are where we are with the case of Aafia, getting assaulted in prison, and asking for people to come and simply get her back home, get her repatriated, so that she can live out the rest of her days and see the children. They are now all grown up now, they're all adults, that she last saw when they were babes in arms.
You know, brother, I know Sister Amina. I had the pleasure of spending time with her along with Dr. Fawzia and some of the other frontline defenders of human rights in Pakistan when I visited in 2014. She is a remarkable sister. SubhanAllah, brother Tarek, what are your thoughts? You know, when you and I first met, Brother Tarek, it was at one of the national conventions. You were the keynote speaker, and I approached you, not knowing if you were going to respond. Wait, but was that the first time at the convention, or was it in Boston at the large center in Boston? Because we met early on twice. We met at the Boston Center. I gave you a copy of a book. And then we also met at a convention center, but on both occasions, I mentioned Aafia to you, and at the convention, I asked you, and it was very short notice, I asked you if you would say something about her. In fact, yes, we met first at the large masjid on Malcolm X Boulevard in Boston. That was when we first met. I had given you a copy of the book that we had just recently released on Aafia, asked you to read it, and you know, and knowing that, or feeling that we were going to connect again at a later date, and alhamdulillah, we did. The second time we met, it was at a convention, and I asked you if you read the book. I asked you if you would say something about Aafia, and you did, and that is what really deepened my respect for you and endeared you to me, because there were so many other prominent leaders and organizations in America that have avoided the issue of Aafia Siddiqui like it was the plague.
If I may, just a moment,
yes.
Before you ask the question, I just want to say something about Sheikh Tarek on this. He's a person that I have known for many, many years. And if there's any time or issue that we've approached him for that is on the basis of basic human dignity, to say something, even if he doesn't know very much about it. He's been the first one in comparison to many people at his same status or maqam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him and strengthen him and protect him to continue this. Please, sorry for that interjection. It was just important.
I mean, my pleasure, brother, to give you that opportunity. You know, given what both I and our brother Moazzam has had to say, and given the circumstance that we now face, this sister of ours, 18 years in, and we're about to begin we haven't had anything for Aafia Siddiqui publicly in over a year because of the pandemic. We're about to launch a 5-city mobilization, 5-city mobilization over a 2-month period in September and October, 5 cities. What do you have to say, Dr. Tarek Ramadan, about this sister of ours and the need for us to respond, especially in this moment when we have in America so much focus on issues of justice? As a result of the conversion of the pandemic and, you know, this movement that erupted as a result of that murder, that police murder that took place in Minnesota, that got the attention of the global community and got a response not only here in America from the globe, but from the global community. The amount of attention and pressure right now in the United States around issues of justice. This is an opportunity for those who have been weak-hearted up until now. What do you have to say to them about Aafia Siddiqui and our responsibility to her and to others like her, Dr. Ramadan?
Barakallahu fikum. Look, I think that once again, all what you said about her life, the trajectory and what happened to her, and even the 2 videos that we watch right now is just showing what we know and in fact translating the reality of what is happening in many countries, and especially in the United States of America, in many Western countries. Now, it should be clear that Aafia Siddiqui and many others, because we are talking about hundreds of people now who are mistreated or in jail, and while they are completely innocent still now. When we talked recently, we were talking about Imam Jamil, and you know, when I met him almost 30 years ago, you know, just I was so impressed about what he had to say in one of the conference, and that we were there together. I was impressed. And my take on what is happening today is that we are now experiencing something which is quite worrying. We are talking about human rights. We are talking about rule of law. But what we should understand is that globally, what they are calling the state of emergency is transforming the rule of law into something which is a gray area where anything is possible. Yes, they can take people from Pakistan, bring them to Eastern Europe, and torture the people in Morocco, torture the people in Egypt, torture the people wherever. Rendition, it's there, and they are lying. They are lying. All what is said about Aafia Siddiqui, about the fact that we didn't know and people are disappearing. We just saw watch the movie of the Mauritanian. It's just showing what happened to somebody who was also handed over by his own country to the Americans, and the way he was treated, as Moazzam was saying. Now we have to take a position, and you know, both of you, and this is why, you know, Moazzam with Cage and all what we had been doing before even he was jailed, and then what he is doing with the brothers in the UK and around the world, and you yourself in Washington being the voice for the voiceless and trying to make people hear what you have to say, and leaders who are not ready to talk or scared or afraid to talk about the issue. I think now it's for us, of course, to support and to use this stories and these realities, Aafia Siddiqui and some of the prominent people that we are supporting, to make it clear that if the Muslims, if the Western Muslims are going to carry on being silent about the fact that this state and ongoing state of emergency is helping and allowing the Western countries, democratic Western countries, to deal with prisoners in that way, to keep people in jail when they know they are innocent, because they know they are innocent. It's not about we don't know. They know they are innocent. They keep them in jail. They are torture. And this is the reality. If it's not physical torture, it's psychological torture, because solitary confinement is torture, is nothing else but torture. So we, as Muslims today, when we are free, tell me, if you went out, for me, for example, you know, I'm the son of some, my father, rahimahullah, left Egypt because of political repression. Am I going to stay in the West and just to keep quiet when this is done now in the West with people who were born and raised or coming from Pakistan and coming from other countries, in the name of, you know what, we have to make the people love Islam. No, we have to make the people respect Muslims and Islam. And if you want the people to respect Muslims, respect yourself and respect the dignity of the people. But what I see today with the leadership of in so many Muslim communities in the West, this silence, this fact that we are not ready to talk, is not only not helping the people who are in jail, but it's not helping the Muslim communities. Because this is, you know, they are testing us. We take this one, we take this one, we take this one, we'll see. If you are silent, we can carry on. If you can't, if you start speaking out, we are going to stop. Because we know that as for the numbers, the Muslims are millions now. So the democratic process is playing for us, if and only if we are knowing our religion enough, respecting our principles enough, and be courageous enough with what we have to stand for. And I think that this is why, once again, when you told me Moazzam is going to be with us, I'm very happy, because I think that he is the voice to be heard now, and you are the voice to be heard. We are now, and we have to try to get the people to be ready to speak out about these issues, and not only to speak about, you know, okay, Black Lives Matter is great, but I want the people from Black Lives Matter to speak about all these people and what they are saying when they are saying, you know, there is connections between, you know, intersectionality. That's fine. But now you bring Muslims with it. Because if you are Black and Muslims like Imam Jamil, you are twice you are going to face injustices. So say it with us. Don't just speak about Blackness, speak about this. And we want also the white convert Muslims and leaders to speak out and to say this is the same issue. We are on the same boat, and I think that our silence is not helping. So I didn't want to come with the details, because you know the details more than me, but what I think we have to share is the global picture, by being able to say we are not going to be quiet, because our dignity as Muslims is also the way we are going to deal with prisoners in our countries. If we are silent, this is showing how much we are cowards in the way we deal with our own principles. Wallahu a'lam wa a'la wa ahkam.
Brother Moazzam, I'm going to give you 1 minute, brother, for just a closing thought, inshallah. 1 minute. You're muted, Aki. You're muted.
Sorry. Again, we began with Afghanistan. I'm going to return back to Afghanistan. Aafia's story begins in Afghanistan. There's a big link, like Tarek said. Whatever happens in Afghanistan is going to have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the world. Though it is a landlocked country, probably the poorest in the world, but it is very significant in our lifetime. It's also very significant in Aafia's case, because if you go back to the root of her case, all the details that wasn't taken about what happened there still need to be prevented. And I believe that the case would be overturned if you had evidence from those police chiefs, governors, and physical employees of the Afghan government who were physically there giving testimony about what happened. There are leaders, as I've said, of the Taliban who've been released. There are Osama bin Laden's right-hand men and close confidants and drivers and so forth. They've been released as part of the kind of an end to the war on terror. how could it be that Aafia Siddiqui, who has not harmed a soul, could remain in prison as a result of this? How do you balance that out? Frontline commanders who fought and killed American soldiers in the battlefield are free, negotiating with the Americans.
On the broadcast.
How is it possible that Aafia Siddiqui remains in prison? So if there's anything now that we must say is that it is time for this to be over. This chapter must, if you want to close this chapter, close it by, if you recall, the Taliban had actually at one point before the negotiations included the return of Aafia Siddiqui. Now this shows the shame of the Pakistani government and how the Taliban said that, you know, she was captured on our soil, she should be returned back to her country. Really, now it's enough. And we need to, like Tarek Ramadan said, that if people are not speaking out, we need to be courageous enough to make those calls. Wallahu alam.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, my brother, it has been a real pleasure having the two of you on together this afternoon. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to do this again soon. An hour is too short. With that said, I want to thank you both, and may Allah ta'ala bless you and fortify you for the struggle ahead. We need your voices, and as they say in South Africa, a luta continua, the struggle must continue. So with that said, I want to close out by first reminding our brothers and sisters, our friends who are Muslim and non-Muslim, of very sterling observations that were made by two prominent figures in the Western tradition and in the Eastern tradition, both of them many generations apart, however, saying the same thing. Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he is reported to have said, civilization is based on justice, and the consequences of oppression are devastating. Therefore, it is said, Allah aids the just state, even if it is non-Muslim, and withholds his help from the oppressive state, even if it is Muslim. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of this experiment called democracy in America, he made an observation that touched upon the same theme, issues of justice and consequence. He said, I tremble for my country when I reflect God is just. His justice cannot sleep forever. So these issues are issues that should be of paramount concern for all of us across the board, irrespective of race, creed, color, philosophy, ideology. It should be of concern to us all, because what goes around at the end of the day comes around. We close with Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time, through the ages, verily, humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.